I felt like an alien. There was always a group that I wanted to belong to, and I never did. You may think this lament was made by a less than exceptional child struggling to fit in. In fact, this statement was made by Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest visionary directors of our time. This is how dyslexia made him feel. Dyslexia is a disease shared by many creative and intelligent people we admire, such as Steven Spielberg, Thomas Edison, Leonardo da Vinci, Steve Jobs, and Walt Disney, to name a few. However, the realities of overcoming this disease are quite another story. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how dyslexia is a social disease. It's generally found to be diagnosed in an academic setting. When my daughter was in kindergarten, she brought home an assignment that had big red X's over every word of the sentence. Of course, she was devastated. I don't know what prompted me to hold the paper up to a mirror, but I read that the sentence was backwards and inside out. It was a perfect mirror image. This is an example of how dyslexia is oftentimes caught in an academic setting, and the perception for the child can be quite devastating. But it's also important because this is where early intervention happens. So this is another way that dyslexia is a social disease, because the environment greatly determines the outcome of the treatment. It's no wonder that 60% of people classified as severely dyslexic come from impoverished situations. Now, the reason for this is because there's lack of resources for early childhood intervention, peer support, and parent education. Now that we talked about how dyslexia is a social disease, we're going to talk a little bit about how dyslexia is a biological disease. Most people are familiar and associate dyslexia with dysgraphia. That's a form of letter and word reversals and writing inside out and backwards, such as my daughter and Leonardo da Vinci. There are some reasons that can easily be explained on why this is the case. This is how the eye sees. When the eye sees an actual image, it is then taken into the eye and refracted on the back of the optic nerve. From there, the image is upside down and inside out. It's up to the brain to process it and give us the final image that resembles the actual image. In the brain of a dyslexic, somewhere this processing doesn't happen, and they actually draw or write what the optic nerve is telling them that they see, which is backwards and inside out. But there are other forms of dyslexia that I'm going to discuss in non-technical or medical jargon, and I'm going to put them in several groups. And the first one would be a surface dyslexia, and this is where a person can read words phonetically. They can sound them out, such as cat. They can say cat, but they can't recognize the word as a whole word, C-A-T. Phonological dyslexia is the opposite of surface dyslexia. They associate words with the whole word, and they cannot sound them out. Spelling is a big problem with any form of dyslexia, but letter reversals and word placement can be a challenge. And direct dyslexia is where a person can actually read out loud, but they can't comprehend or process what they're saying. Knowing the different types of dyslexia leads us to, well, what causes dyslexia? And the first category is developmental, and this is based on brain abnormalities that can happen either prenatally or in early childhood development, or you can have acquired dyslexia, which means that somewhere in your early childhood development you had some sort of stress or trauma that causes your brain to pick up these characteristics. So we've talked about the causes, and we've talked about the types. You might be wondering, where's the hope? So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how dyslexia is treated. One of the most important things to remember is that the individual needs lots of encouragement and self-esteem building. Educators and parents employ a variety of different techniques, and they're all based on the individual. And one of the techniques is a multisensory approach to learning. I'm going to show you an example. My daughter, this is grits actually, and grits are kind of soft, and we would put them in a pan like this, and the teacher would give her words or letters to write. And the reason why this is important is because it's engaging the sense of touch, and it also, you can easily clear out what you do if you make a mistake. So she didn't have to have paper full of erasure marks that would hurt her self-esteem. The other approach is metacognition. That's actually to think about how you think. This could be one reason why people with dyslexia, they end up with tremendous resilience and critical thinking skills. Reinforcement and overteaching and overlearning is another way that dyslexics are taught, and that one-on-one engagement is very important. In conclusion, dyslexics are gifted people whose IQs range from average to above average. They have trouble translating language into thought and thought into language. Although the three-dimensional world is alive and well, often these highly creative people struggle with taking the world and putting it in 2D, in the flat world of pen, paper, academics, reading, writing, and spelling. In closing, I want to leave you with a quote from Walt Disney. It's kind of fun to do the impossible.